Welcome to this explainer. If you're a sysadmin or a tech support pro helping your organization make the big jump from IPv4 to IPv6, well, you've landed in exactly the right spot. We're diving into part 6 of an 8-part series, IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. This entire series is brought to you by Virtualization Options LLC, which is a fantastic Colorado-based tech research, education, and advisory group. Now, in this specific session, we're zooming in strictly on Chapter 6. We're going to completely rewire that foundational troubleshooting mindset of yours so you can actually conquer the realities of an IPv6 environment. Let's get right into it. Okay, real quick, here is our structured battle plan for diagnosing these common failure modes. We'll start by unlearning IPv4 habits, look at the dual stack reality, and check out addressing and connectivity pitfalls. Then we hit the PMTUD black hole, talk about why ICMPv6 is absolutely not optional, and finally wrap up with some edge cases and key takeaways. All right, Section 1. Unlearning IPv4 habits, a total paradigm shift. Before we can fix anything, we basically have to rip the Band-Aid off. Honestly, our IPv4 muscle memory, the stuff we've relied on for decades, it's kind of our biggest enemy here. IPv6 isn't just a bigger address space bolted onto the old system. You've got to forget everything you know about pinging a broadcast address. Seriously, if you try pinging 255.255.255.255, it's going to get you exactly nowhere. IPv6 completely replaces broadcast with multicast. On top of that, the protocol assumes pretty much every device is potentially globally routable, which fundamentally changes your entire security posture and means you simply cannot rely on NAT the way you used to. This is a perfect illustration of that first major mental shift. Seeing multiple IPs on a single interface, totally normal. You might see a link local address starting with fee80 alongside a global unicast address, plus some temporary privacy addresses, all sitting there at once. Do not freak out. It is not a misconfiguration. I've seen admins waste hours trying to fix this, but this is literally just how the protocol is designed to operate. Moving right along to Section 2, the dual stack reality. This one is all about issues hiding in plain sight. Look under the hood of almost any modern network, and you're going to find this clever little mechanism called happy eyeballs. Basically, modern browsers really prefer an IPv6 connection, but they race it against IPv4. If IPv6 doesn't respond fast enough, usually after a tiny 250 millisecond delay, it just falls back to IPv4. So what does this mean for you? Well, a completely broken IPv6 path won't actually trigger an outage alert from your users. To them, it's just going to feel like a weird, annoying 250 millisecond lag on every single connection as it silently fails over. Okay, Section 3, addressing and connectivity pitfalls. We're talking about the silent killers of your local network. Say a machine suddenly drops all global connectivity out of nowhere, you're probably looking at a DAD failure. That's duplicate address detection. When an interface boots up, it essentially yells out to the network to see if its IP is unique. If another host answers back, boom, conflict detected. The operating system just silently flags that address as DAD failed and completely halts connectivity. We see this all the time with cloned virtual machines that accidentally share identical MAC addresses or when rogue devices get plugged in. Now, here's another huge pitfall: your default gateway. In IPv6, it's delivered entirely through router advertisements, or RAs. There's no explicit gateway lease renewal like you're used to with IPv4 DHCP. Instead, it relies 100% on periodic RA refreshes from the router. Pay really close attention to this part. If a router sends an RA with a lifetime of 0, it is explicitly telling every host on that segment, hey, stop using me as a gateway immediately. Section 4. Let's tackle a classic help desk nightmare: the PMTUD black hole. The symptoms of this one are baffling enough to make any sysadmin want to pull their hair out. Tiny packets, like a basic ping, they work perfectly. But the second you try a large file copy, load a heavy HTTPS site, or even try to establish an SSH session, the whole thing completely hangs right after the TCP handshake. The connection just drops into an invisible void. So why does this happen? Well, it follows a very specific, tragic sequence. First, the source sends out a large outbound packet. Next, a router somewhere along the path hits a link with a smaller MTU limit. Now, since IPv6 routers do not fragment packets themselves, the router drops it and generates an ICMPv6 Type 2 packet too big message. It sends this back to tell the sender to shrink its packets. But here is the critical failure point: an overzealous firewall blocks that return message.
The sender never gets the memo, keeps waiting, and the connection just stalls out forever.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5. ICMPv6 is not optional. Seriously, this is the golden rule. That black hole we just talked about, it happens because we need a massive shift in how we approach firewall policies. In the old IPv4 days, blocking ICMP was a super common security practice, right? You wanted to hide from network scans. But in IPv6, the source text is completely explicit here. Doing that literally breaks the internet. ICMPv6 is absolutely fundamental to the protocol. If you block it entirely, you break everything from path MTU discovery to the neighbor discovery protocol. So consider this your ultimate firewall cheat sheet. You absolutely must permit type 1, that's for destination unreachable errors. You've got to permit type 2, that's the packet too big message we just talked about, which is critical for PMTUD. And you absolutely have to allow types 133 through 137. Those handle neighbor discovery. Without those last ones, your hosts literally won't even be able to find their own local router. All right, home stretch. Section 6, edge cases and takeaways. Let's wrap this up. You've got to be incredibly careful with older legacy VPN clients. They tend to do one of two really bad things in a dual stack world. Either they cause a split tunnel leak by just totally ignoring IPv6 traffic, which means your users bypass corporate security policies entirely, or they blindly block all IPv6 traffic. And that breaks access to modern sites without even attempting to tunnel the data safely. Also, if you happen to be running an IPv6-only client segment, remember that you're probably relying on NAT64 and DNS64 to fake access to legacy IPv4 servers. It's a clever trick. DNS64 synthesizes a fake IPv6 record, and NAT64 translates it at the edge gateway. But honestly, it's pretty fragile. It breaks the instant an old application tries to use a hard-coded IPv4 literal address, bypassing DNS entirely. Okay, if you're going to take a screenshot of anything today, make it this list of golden rules for sysadmins. 1. Multiple IP addresses on one interface? Totally normal. 2. ARP is dead, so learn your new NDP tools. 3. Document your prefix delegation so an upstream change doesn't silently nuke your routing. 4. Stop trying to use NAT as a security tool. And 5. When you're troubleshooting, explicitly isolate your dual stack issues using specific commands like curl-6 and curl-4. I'm going to leave you with this final critical question to go investigate in your own infrastructure right now. Are your legacy IPv4-minded security rules silently choking the life out of your modern network? There is a very high chance they are, and it's definitely time to go check. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy troubleshooting out there.